Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So,
And good to see you, Saf. Is that how you say your name?
yeah, it is. It is.
Okay. Well, I'm an atheist, and the way I usually talk about the problem of evil is from the perspective of God before creation.
Mm.
And then I think what you said earlier was very good about not making any assumptions. So I'll just ask you, do you believe that Allah sees the future, is never surprised, knows what's going to happen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And
yeah.
do you believe Allah is perfect? You can't get better than Allah?
For sure.
Okay. And so if we have, I like the two worlds hypothetical experiment. So let's say you have two worlds. One world is just Allah.
Yeah.
Another world is Allah plus extra stuff like the universe.
Yeah.
The first world has no sin, correct? Has no pain, has no suffering. The second world has all in it, but has all that other stuff. Which world is better in your opinion? The first world or the second world?
Well, I can't make that judgment because
It's just your opinion.
yeah, how could you compare a world, let's say, if God inhabits a world, a possible world, in which there is only God, and I prefer, let's say, that world over a world in which there is God, and there are creatures, or God plus one, or Allah plus one, in which He can then manifest or exhibit or exemplify His beautiful names and attributes. It's difficult for the mind to make these judgments. Just like how can I prefer a world in which there are no moral creatures, because there are no moral properties or moral freedom, to a world in which there aren't such creatures? On what basis am I judging? Can you see? I can just have an inclination or a preference, but that's all it could be, right? Yeah.
Well, I guess the question gets more at, if by definition Allah is perfect and you can't get better, then anything you add to it's not going to make it better.
Yeah, for sure. I think adding something to, I don't think creation adds to the somehow God lacked perfection, then He created creation, and then He became a little bit more perfect.
Yeah, you don't believe that, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but now why the divine would create creatures in such a loving way? We were just talking about one of the names of God being Al-Wadud, the one who loves without any need for a person to have that love. So why He did that, these are going into the realms of divine motives. Can you see? And I will start to struggle unless He discloses His reasons why.
Is there anything that you think that Allah doesn't want?
No, He didn't say in scripture that He doesn't want. It's just, if someone were to ask me on what grounds are you making to say one world is better than another world, I'm just going to struggle. I can give some, sort of generic reasons why I might prefer one based on scripture or something like that.
But can you think of something that Allah would say, no, I don't want this?
Yeah, He doesn't like, for example, lots of things that He doesn't love. He tells us He doesn't love that people are deceived and they run away from Him.
Okay, so let's call that disbelief. Yeah, disbelief. Let's call that disbelief.
Right. Yeah.
So in the first world, there's no disbelief because it's just Allah.
Yeah.
In the second world, there's Allah plus people who do believe and disbelieve.
Sure.
So now we have two worlds. Yeah. One world that entails something that Allah doesn't want, disbelief.
For sure.
So wouldn't you say the first world's better because the first world doesn't have any disbelief in it?
Not necessarily. Again, you need a value criterion, you see, when you're judging between worlds, because by having people who disbelieve, there's also the possibility that people will lovingly turn to God, because you need moral freedom in order to believe and disbelieve in God. So
right.
Maybe
we have belief and disbelief, but in the first world, there's just Allah. You can't get better than that. So I understand your answer is basically you don't want to judge between the two worlds. Do you believe Allah was free not to create the second world?
For sure. No, He's not bad. Yeah, what I understand is that the divine, if He creates a world, then He creates it out of a choice, not out of a necessity. So I believe in a choice model of divine action. I don't believe in the necessitarian model.
Okay, so
Yeah, yeah.
Allah could have chosen not to create anything.
He could have chosen not to, because he's not bound by any higher principle or any higher axiom by which he must create a world. He creates it out of choice. Now, why he created the world, now it's Allah plus the world or plus creation, why he created everything other than himself, and whether that world is better, it's hard to judge. But the fact that he created it, and he's blessed me with being and existence. So from my own predilection, I would think it's a good world. The fact that
But there would be no disbelief if Allah never created, correct?
There'd be no disbelief for sure. There'd also be no belief for sure, right?
So okay, so I agree with it. Makes what you're saying makes logical sense. If Allah chose of his free will not to create, there'd be zero disbelief.
I'm saying that if someone were to say a world in which there are creatures who disbelieve, which would also entail that they believe as well, maybe that possibility of belief where someone lovingly turns to Allah, that might be the good, the disguised good that becomes a God justifying reason why Allah created the world. That could be the good, for all I know. But what we do get, if I want to get a bit mystical, in the mystical tradition, you do get some scholars who say, no, but this is their own deliberations. There's no theological, there's no normativity here. But
this is the tension. I think Muslim, Christians, Jews all have to, well, maybe not Jews, have to deal with, is that Allah. Tell me if you disagree with anything I'm about to say. Allah is not okay with disbelief or sin. He's not okay with it. He doesn't like it. He created knowing that would result.
For sure.
And he said, I'm going to create it anyhow.
That's right.
That's basically the problem of evil right there.
That's right. And the angels in the Quranic tradition, the angels asked that very same question in when, according to our belief, Adam was created. And then the angels asked God, look, why are you creating a being that is going to be a representative that's not only going to create mischief on the earth, he's going to create his progeny is going to create bloodshed on the earth. And then God's response was, look, I know what you do not know. So you are finite creatures, and I am your Lord. I know better that there may be greater goods that unfold. That's one possible reason for why creating human beings on earth.
But you still have the problem of hell. I won't make any assumptions, but do you believe that some people go to hell?
Can I ask you a question, Pinecreek? Because I think, Dr. Saf, the answer he wants from you is, I would choose world A over world B. So why don't you, as a theist, believe that God should choose world A over world B? Is that's what you're getting at, right, Pinecreek? I mean,
but you need a value criteria, you see.
You need a value precisely
criteria to judge between one possible world with another possible world. Why must we assume that a world that God creating, let's say, automaton, or a world with just only people just do good? Why is that a world that is better than a world in which we inhabit now?
Because of what you said earlier. What
criterion would you prefer, one over the other?
This is like an internal critique. So the criterion we prefer is, what does Allah desire? That's the criterion. Allah is the criterion.
And our response will be that what he desires may be secured by creating the kind of world that he's created, this world.
But what he doesn't desire is disbelief, yes?
For sure. But he knows, but
there would be no disbelief if he never created. So there's the tension.
That's not a tension, because what you could say is the purposes that God seeks by creating the world with the possibility, not the necessity, but the possibility of disbelief being in there. God creating a world in which there is a possibility of disbelief, because there is a possibility of belief, maybe over the span of whatever human history, however, or whatever span of time you want to take, secures the goods that he wants to seek based on his wise purposes.
Right, but some of those goods that he secures to seek is knowing with 100% certainty, which I think you believe that some will disbelieve and end up in hell. Some people
will willfully, antagonistically reject God, doesn't matter what circumstance they will be put in.
Right. And so there would be no pain, no evil, no suffering, and most importantly, there'd be nobody in hell today or in the future. There'd be nobody in hell if Allah never created, correct?
If he never created hell, yeah, there'd be nobody in
No,
hell.
if he never created anything, there'd
If he
be
never
no.
created anything, yeah, there'd be no heaven and hell. Yeah.
So every person who ends up in hell has ended up there because Allah chose it of his free will to create.
Yeah, he chose people to create. He chose to create people. People choose whether they want to be with God or be distant from God. Yeah.
Right, but if Allah never created them, knowing what they would choose and that they would
Sure.
end up there, they would not be there.
For
So,
sure.
so just like with companies, the CEO, the buck stops at the top. Allah is
But
at
that's
least
all the
partially
inference you can
responsible
make,
for
you see.
everything. But is that?
But
Would you
you
agree
can't-
that Allah's responsible?
But you cannot move to a further. Your inference can only go so far. All you can say is, if God didn't create anything, then nobody would have went to hell. That's true, because there would be no heaven, no hell, no nothing. That's
Right.
true. That's all the inference that you can make. There are no further inferences you can make about.
That's the
God
important
or,
one.
No, but that's
Pinecreek.
that
Can I
doesn't
ask you a
do
question? Yeah.
that doesn't do anything for anyone's view. You're just saying that if God didn't create anything, then it follows that some people would not have been hell if God created hell. That just follows from the fact of God created hell.
Yep.
But there are no more moral claims or further claims that you can infer from just that statement. Yeah.
Well, we can, because if morality is defined by the nature of Allah, and Allah doesn't like disbelief, yet he created knowing disbelief would result.
Sorry, Pinecreek.
Yeah,
Pinecreek.
I may be losing a track of inference, I think.
Yeah. So Pinecreek,
what are you losing?
do you think? Let me ask you a question, Pinecreek. Sorry. Do you think Allah likes sinful people?
No.
Do you think that Allah therefore would want to create a world where there is no sinful people?
Yeah, correct.
That would be wrong from an Islamic paradigm, because
Why is that?
Because from the Islamic paradigm, we believe that God wanted people to commit sin so God would forgive them.
But did God want to create people so they end up in hell? Would you agree with that?
No, but you understand that particular point.
Yes. You're saying God created people because he wanted them to sin so he could forgive them.
Right. So your point, this is what I understand from your argument, because let's narrow it down. Your point was that God desires nobody to commit sin, let's say, as an example. Right. Therefore, God has the power to do that. Therefore, God would only seek to establish a world that doesn't have people committing sin. That was your line of argument. Now, I gave a possible argument or possible explanation. In fact, it's the Islamic explanation, which is that God does want to create people who commit sin so that he can forgive them. So although God dislikes sinners, he allows sinners to exist in order for God to forgive them.
I get that.
Yeah.
But then you got to take it one step further. Does God want to create people knowing with 100% certainty that some will die without asking for forgiveness from Allah and end up in hell?
But you understand the point, the wider point. This is the wider point now.
Yeah, but does God... I understand.
What's the wider point that I'm making then, Pinecreek?
You're saying that God created people because he gave them an opportunity to freely ask for forgiveness of him.
No,
yes?
That's not the wider point. The wider point isn't that.
What's the wider point?
The wider point is that we have limitations in terms of understanding the reasons why God would create certain things, and therefore to try to determine that therefore there is a logical contradiction, which is what you're trying to argue.
No, I'm not saying a logical contradiction.
Well,
what are you arguing for then? Because I think the problem is, and this is what Dr. Saf was pointing out, that based on what he answered and your claims, it doesn't necessarily entail what you think it does. You're making an additional inference that you cannot get from the information that you've
What's the inference I'm making?
Well, you tell us, because you just said it wasn't a logical contradiction.
No. My whole point is to help the Muslim feel icky about it. It's just seriously, that's it. Because and I think it's a very powerful argument, which I think even theists will admit to. There's no problem of evil for the atheist; it's for the theist. So it's.
Oh no, I think
that's wrong.
Have the biggest problem of evil.
Okay, scratch that from the record, because I don't want to.
Pinecreek, can you make the argument? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Can you just make the argument right now in premise conclusion form?
Well, I'll try. So premise one would be God doesn't like sin; he doesn't like disbelief. Premise two would be something like God knows the future with certainty. He's never surprised. I think both of these things, both these premises you guys agree with. Premise three, it would be that he knows with certainty some will disbelieve and end up in hell. Conclusion, Allah was okay with some people disbelieving and going to hell.
So
Is there anything I said you disagree with?
that conclusion that Allah was okay with people disbelieving and going to hell, right? Are you saying that contradicts?
All I'm saying is
God
that it make you guys feel icky
did dislike. It's not okay. So you're arguing from emotion here because it's not
Definitely.
making me feel icky. Okay,
You are.
Does it make you feel icky?
Here's the issue. Here's the issue, Pinecreek.
Well, he just said he's arguing from emotion.
What you want to say is that this world that God actualized is not ideal in the sense that there is evil in it and people will be tortured in hell for an eternity. Therefore, therefore it is something that is not the best of all possible world, or it's not something that's morally good or justified, right? But let me ask you a question. What are your views on morality? What's your underlying ethical theory that
I want you
makes
to assume that I have none.
How can I understand what you mean by good and evil?
I'm using your definitions.
What is my definition of good and evil?
Anything that goes in line with Allah's will, His nature is good. Anything that doesn't is evil.
Okay, fine.
Am I wrong?
So let's go with that. Let's go with that.
Am I wrong?
Let's assume it's my definition. Let's assume it's my definition. Then how does me feeling icky about anything affect reality in any way, shape, or form?
Doesn't.
If you're granting for the sake
Abdul,
of the
you
argument,
gotta stick on this point. This is the fundamental point.
If you're granting for the sake of the argument that good and evil are defined by what God does, then why does me feeling icky about anything have any significance at all here? Because you're granting that what He does is good by definition. Let's call it a day and go home.
Yeah.
But wait. You guys feel icky. So what's wrong with feeling icky?
Well,
what does feeling icky prove?
I was wrong about you, Abdul. You don't feel icky about it, right?
Let's assume I do. Let's assume I do. What does it prove? What argument are you trying to make?
It shows.
If you're granting, you yourself are granting for the sake of the argument that good and evil are defined by God's acts, right? So whatever, it's a divine command theory, basically. Right now, if that is the case, and you're already granting that in your argument, then you say that me feeling icky should have any role to play in determining what is good or evil, then you're contradicting yourself.
No, I'm not saying what determines good or evil. I'm saying what you do with your life in terms of worship, how you practically outlive the consequences of this belief. That's what I'm talking about.
Fine, I can feel icky all day, right? But that doesn't constitute an argument. So do you have a better argument to make than, guys, you should feel icky about this? Because us feeling icky about it doesn't prove anything unless you're going to say that our subjective feeling about what is good and evil actually reflects actual reality of what is objectively good and evil.
Do you have children? Okay.
I do.
What if God decreed before the beginning of creation that your children, all of them, will end up in hell? Let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. Would you have rather God created nothing?
I don't know if I would have rather God created nothing. I wouldn't have liked it. Let's make that more modest.
Why wouldn't you have liked it?
That I wouldn't have liked it. But then here's the fundamental question. Based on your definition of good and evil that you're using for the sake of this argument, my not liking it is irrelevant.
Okay.
That's the point.
But
that's the point you have to focus on.
I understand. You're making
yeah.
But my question to you though is, would you worship Allah if He told you that all your children He created for destruction, to go to hell? Would you still worship Him?
Again, accepting your definition for granted, accepted your definition that you're using in the argument, because I'm dealing with your ideas. Yes, I would, because we would like to be a people that follows reason and evidence. So objectively speaking, if that is what's good and if that is how good and evil is defined, God is the source of objective good. So I would still want to worship that God.
Why? You still have the option not
because we don't need to have an emotional argument or appeal to emotion. The fact is that you've already admitted that your whole argument is based on emotions rather than a strict logical argument. So
it's powerful because of emotion. But the point of everything I've been saying, I think you guys agree with. And the thing,
No, I don't. I don't agree.
what
with
part
that.
have you
No.
disagreed?
Your
The premises
inference
that I gave.
your inference that you're going to that we should say, oh no, the world in which God existed alone by himself is better. No, we're rejecting
I asked the
that.
question.
Nobody agreed to that.
But you both agreed.
Yeah,
that
but
God
here's
saw
the question
future.
you were asking.
No,
That's
Abdu,
the
listen, you got to focus on this point. You're coming on here and you're not giving a logical argument. You're admitting that you're giving an argument that is purely based on emotions.
I'm giving an argument to show that Allah created something that he doesn't want. Are we agreed?
No.
No, we don't agree.
No.
That's what
Okay,
your
stop.
inference
Okay,
is that
okay.
you're assuming.
Does Allah want disbelief?
See, we've already been down this line of questioning.
Does Allah want this? Does Allah want?
We've already
disbelief?
answered that.
You said no.
So
Did
there's a
God
difference
create knowing
between
that disbelief would
irada.
result?
Okay, so there's a difference between irada kawniyya and irada shar'iyya, right? One of the brothers mentioned in the chat, Blazing Heart, jazakallah khair. So irada kawniyya, which is God's cosmic decree, is what he wants the world to be like. God's irada shar'iyya, or his shar'i or legislative decree, is what he dislikes in terms of legislation, moral right and moral wrong. You're equivocating between the two when you say God doesn't will for good, for evil, but then he wills to create evil. There's an equivocation on these two wills, right? So he dislikes the evil in a legislative shara'i sense, but he wills for a world that contains evil to exist. So there's an equivocation you're making.
I don't quite understand that, because if Allah didn't want disbelief, all he had to do is not create. Yes, I think we're all agreed on that.
We don't. So what do you mean by want here? So we we say is that he wanted a world with disbelief. That doesn't mean that he likes disbelief in and of itself.
Okay, that's fine. So you're saying he wanted people to disbelieve in him? To create a world where some would?
God willed to create a world where people would freely disbelieve in him, although he doesn't morally approve of that disbelief. There's nothing incoherent about
Okay. But do you believe Allah knew that if he didn't create, then all that would have been solved?
There's no problem to solve. God willed for that world to exist.
No, there is a problem. Disbelief is a problem.
No,
focus on this. Focus on this
not a
part.
problem for
Focus
Allah?
on this part. God wanted this world to exist.
The problem.
Is disbelief a problem for Allah?
No.
That's the whole point. You're making an inference to that.
I'm asking, is sin a problem for Allah?
No.
Is people going to hell for eternity a problem for Allah?
No.
Okay. So Allah, would you say, I don't know a better word to use, but is Allah okay with sin, disbelief, and people going to hell?
You're equivocating now. So he's okay with it in the sense that he willed for a world to exist that contains these things, but he does not. He says, or he decrees that these things are morally wrong, right? So that's not the same thing as him not willing for them to exist.
What did you just say? He decrees that they're morally wrong? What did I missed that?
Yeah,
he legislates.
He legislates that they're morally wrong.
So he
sin
created
wrong.
something and legislated it as morally wrong?
No.
Pinecreek,
Created
you're
a
gonna
world in
have
which
to
people sin, and he said that these sins are not okay. You're saying that there's some kind of inconsistency, but then when we ask for what the logical inconsistency is, you don't have one other than.
Well, I'm trying to steel man you here.
It doesn't feel good. No, we're trying to steel man you, but you're not giving us anything to work with. You're just saying it's an emotional argument. It's not.
It's your belief, not mine. That's why I'm asking you the question.
So let's give you a final chance.
You're getting to a conclusion. You're making an inference from either what you're saying or what we're saying that doesn't actually follow by necessity. That's the whole problem with your argument.
Well, my argument is basically this, and tell me, you stop me when you disagree with something. Allah is perfect. Allah knew the future. He doesn't like sin. He doesn't like disbelief, but he created it. What else?
No, Pinecreek, I'm sorry. We're going to keep going on. So the point is, either make the logical argument or admit that you're not making a logical argument. You're making an argument from emotion. In which case, the emotional argument
it's not quite just an argument from emotion. It's also an internal critique that shows that there's a tension there, and I think even Saf admits this.
So I'll tell you what, either provide the logical argument right now in premise conclusion form, or go back, prepare it like AP did. He did his homework and he made a video after the stream. Go back, prepare the argument in a way that we can understand it.
Well,
where
here's
your terms are defined, where it's intelligible, and come present it, and we'll deal with it. But the way we're presenting it now, that's not a logical argument.
What's interesting about this is there's hardly anything you guys have disagreed with me on. It's maybe you saying I'm using different.
That's the whole point. Is you're inferring something based on what we agreed on, and you're getting to a conclusion that we don't agree with. Now, Seth hasn't spoken in a while. I'd like for him to come in and maybe comment on what he is seeing happening here.
Oh, no. Thanks for bringing in the conversation again. I think it's important that perhaps we tease out, or when we can, and another time perhaps, I'm not sure, what the assumptions are on each, what the underlying assumptions are of the argument. Whenever we begin with, would you prefer God doing X and Y? Already we have to assume what is the interlocutor, what is their idea about God, even if they might try and use our own definition, because grating underneath are these assumptions about surely God would not want to prefer a world in which he creates free creatures, which has the corollary of there being sin. Not that he creates the sin with the person, but that there is a corollary of sin.
Right.
But surely he would want a world in which only there was good and not sin. Well, how do you know that? I mean, this is what I'm saying. The value criterion to use to judge one world is better or worse than, and worse in what respect, first of all? That depends on the background information we're using to construct the argument. So relative to certain background information, I'm sure the answers could be yes or no. So we have to get the background information straight. If someone says, if Allah is X, Y, then and then this happens, then wouldn't the conclusion be this? Yeah, given X and Y, but let me also bring in A, B, and C. Can you see? So the background information is important for how we construct the argument. So I think it would be better for me to learn better the argument, perhaps when we have a way we can.
But you've heard what I've said before, right? So there's nothing new, and usually the outs a lot of theists give is that they limit God's knowledge of the future. There's open theists. Yeah. They say he can only know the knowable. So that's one out that theists have. Yeah, another out is say that they limit his omnipotence. Sure. That certain attributes of God is better when it's demonstrated, and so therefore that's why you need to create. Another out is that God is not free. It's part of his nature to create, so he had to create, because if he was free, he would see what's coming and say, you know what, I don't need this. I don't need people.
But that's an assumption. I don't need this. I mean, it's not about need. So this.
Well, do you believe that, Seth?
The language becomes very important. It's not that God is perfected if he didn't create a world, or he did create a world, or some particular purpose completes his actions or something like that. To assume that about God, is all ready to make assumptions about the nature.
But do you believe that Allah needed to create in order to?
No, I'm saying he didn't need anything.
No.
Yeah.
So if Allah could have just walked away from creation and said, I don't need this. I don't need people to ask forgiveness of me.
But that, again, it goes back to what you take God to be. At the same time as well, he wanted to create. I mean, so we're going into the realms of divine motives, you see. So it becomes difficult if you're assuming that this is a being who is, maximally great, powerful, and has all the great making properties that philosophers talk about. So he has those properties. Assuming that you take that kind of understanding, assuming it for the argument, if you are, then you're going to be restricted in how and what you can say about the divine. I'm just saying that I can't make these value judgments because it's in the realm of the divine motives and actions now. How could I know, which world to prefer? A world where there's Allah Jalla wa Ala himself, and then Allah plus the rest of creation, right? Which is better and which I would prefer. I'll need some criterion, right, to decide which one. And
most people don't prefer pain, suffering, and definitely hell. I think that's pretty safe to say.
But these are your assumptions.
They may serve a purpose. This is the whole point.
That's a pretty good assumption.
There may be justified reasons.
No, but these are your
That's where we disagree with.
Can someone raise their hand who prefers hell? I mean, eternal conscious torment?
Pinecreek, No,
That's why I'm so worried about it, and this is why
you?
realizing the seriousness of hell, I want to share the message of truth to others to save myself and others from this.
No, but nobody prefers to
unimaginable
be
place.
there. Is my point.
Yeah, but you're saying a world in which there is hell as opposed to one that's not, and you're trying to say that everyone should say that the one where there is a hell is necessarily worse than one where there isn't. But that's an assumption that we're not buying into. So you have to provide an argument for that underlying assumption that's underpinning your entire argument.
Or a value criterion. Criterion.
And you don't have a criterion by which you can even judge for preferring one world over another.
Well, that's why I was asking the questions about the criterion from Allah's perspective.
Yes, and obviously by the fact that he created, that demonstrates your assumption that this world is necessarily worse is actually wrong. Just say?
The fact that he created?
Yeah, the fact that he created demonstrates that your assumption that based on his character, let me finish, sir, that he would not have created is fundamentally flawed unless he's like schizophrenic. I mean, what are we talking about? Because
the fact he created shows that he did want this, did prefer this. But this is the question at hand. The problem of evil is a question that's posited by atheists or even non-theists of a different religion to as an internal critique that maybe the God you're talking about doesn't exist.
Yeah, but we already have arguments that get us to that God.
I know. I understand as a cumulative case, and you talk about other things, but on this issue alone, with the problem of evil,
you can't look at it in a vacuum. That's
you're
the whole
assuming we're now sentient beings looking at this issue and asking ourselves,
Pinecreek, if I can
maybe Allah didn't create.
Can I give you two statements? Hell exists. Hell is real.
Okay.
And God does not exist. How can you fill the steps for me for those two statements?
You can be really hard without changing the definition of hell.
Well, this is the point. So the whole you cannot say, well,
some people would say hell is reincarnation into a worm.
Well, this is what I'm just about to elaborate on this hypothetical argument. So this is why I'm saying that you cannot infer the non-existence of God from the existence of hell. Just like we argued for about an hour and a half, we discussed that you cannot infer the non-existence of God from the existence of evil. So you got to fill in the steps. So whoever is saying that argument, they got to fill in the steps and give their definitions. And
if one of the definitions of God is if one of the definitions of God is a God that doesn't want anyone to go to hell, which I know you guys don't believe, but if someone had that definition and you could demonstrate or in some way, I don't know how, that hell is real and people go there, then you've defeated that God. Yeah?
No, because it doesn't disprove God exists. You've just shown an argument that might be a rebutting defeater.
That's what I mean.
It might be, but it's not clear. You have to show a logical contradiction for it to be a rebutting defeater.
Yeah, it's the want, not want. That's the logical contradiction.
I think when we see the argument, I would like to learn better.
Well, you've heard this before. Like this is the possible worlds before creation type argument, which I'm
the problem.
Again, there's certain assumptions about metaphysics of possible worlds and so on.
Yeah. But I've taken way too much of your time.
I think the problem, Pinecreek, is that we're trying to deal with your argument. Now you're trying to say on the one hand that your God is impossible. And we're saying, in order for you to say our God is impossible, you have to provide. You actually use that word impossible. You have to provide a logical argument to demonstrate a logical impossibility. Initially, you came on and you started saying, "I'm here just to make Muslims feel icky about their position." Abdurrahman said, "Well, yeah," and then Abdurrahman explained the point, which is that that's just an appeal to emotion. Jake made the point as well. Then said, "Look, okay, what's the actual?" Logical contradiction? What's the premise conclusion that we can look at to analyze whether there are logical contradictions? You didn't really provide one per se.
Well, yeah, I did.
Okay, go on. Explain one more time. Explain what's the logical contradiction. This is, and what you're saying, this is a logical contradiction, yeah?
No, well, if there is a logical contradiction, but it's all steeped deep in definitions, it's the want. Allah wants and Allah doesn't want. And then Abdul mentioned this earlier when he talked about, I forget the words he used because he spoke a different language, but there's the different ways of
He
God's.
decrees
Yeah.
a cosmic
Right.
reality that
And I have heard
where people
Christians
can
give the same
freely
answer.
choose, where people can freely choose, but at the same time he legislates for human beings to say that they should avoid sin and hellfire, or sin and disbelief. Yeah.
So
There's no logical contradiction there.
well,
So the point
yeah.
being is a logical contradiction would be is that God wants to stop all disbelief, but disbelief exists, therefore God is either not omnipotent or he's not all-knowing. Yeah. That would be a logical contradiction. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to say this is what Islam fits into, but Islam doesn't fit into this.
Well, I agree. If Allah wants people to go to hell, then there's no problem.
Because so Islam says this. This is what Islam says. Islam says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world, created heaven and hell, and created human beings with free will, to the ability to choose, and then said to human beings that if you freely choose,
I understand all that.
If you freely choose to have belief in good actions, you go to paradise. If you freely choose to commit sin and disbelief, you go to hellfire. Yeah. Now, on that premise, that's why I asked you a very specific question. On that premise, what is the logical contradiction, or is it just an appeal to emotion?
There's no logical contradiction at all.
Okay.
If you guys believe that Allah wants people to go to hell.
No, but what did I just say here? I said God created human beings with free will. He created the universe, or a creation, with heaven and hell. Yeah.
Right.
And God legislated that
you're focusing
people,
on. I understand.
And that God legislated, that therefore whoever commits disbelief, will be assigned to hellfire,
Right.
and who has belief in righteous actions will go to paradise.
You want to focus on the free will of humans, and I want to focus on the free will of Allah. That's the point.
Right. So explain.
God wants.
Link the two. Yeah. Link the two. Just sorry, Abdul. Link the two together. So you're saying that God could have created a universe in which human beings only choose to go to paradise.
No, I'm not even saying that. I'm saying Allah had two choices: create or not create. So let's assume if he creates, it would have to be exactly what you guys are describing. That's one option. The other option is don't create anything.
Okay. And
those
so
are two options.
And so
if you're a Muslim and you say, "Oh, no, Allah is okay." I mean, I know that language is a problem. Allah is okay with it, or he desires it, or he wanted to, but he's not surprised by what happens with his creation. And so he created knowing exactly what would happen, that some people would end up in hell. And you know what? He created anyhow.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
So
there's no contradiction.
So where's the contradiction then? There is no contradiction.
So my goal,
we're spinning in circles, guys.
No, but at Pinecreek, your goal should be this. Your goal should be to be epistemically justified and consistent with the way you're trying to build an argument. Building an argument just appealing to emotion is not sincere, honest. Well, you could say sincere and honest in one perspective, but it's not epistemically justified to build an argument just to appeal to emotions, because we can make any argument based upon emotions. It then becomes my emotions versus somebody else's emotions. You want to to be able to justify it based on reason and arguments, isn't it?
Yeah, but Sharif, the other problem is that you said you were doing an internal critique, but then it wound up being an external critique because of your fundamental presupposition of saying, well, surely anybody would agree that this world is not as good as this other world.
No, I just talked about one little thing. I said, anybody here who wants to spend eternity in hell, raise your hand. And Abdul even admitted earlier, he agreed. Okay, I know what you mean. No,
we didn't. We never said. No, we never said. See, you're confusing the difference between an individual actually wanting to spend eternity in hell versus a world in which hell exists. The two aren't the same, and for you to act as if they are the same is a problem.
The bottom line is this: there would be no disbelief, no sin, no pain, no suffering, no hell, people in hell if Allah never created, and that's something everyone here agrees with.
And so what?
Here's your thesis statement.
What's the conclusion?
The conclusion is that you have a choice to worship a god or not. That's the conclusion.
Yeah, you do have a choice. And so what?
And so or be open to the idea that maybe the God you believe in doesn't exist. Maybe there is a God, but not the one you believe in, because I guarantee you. I guarantee this is one claim I'll make. I'll guarantee that there's some Muslims listening here who are listening to me.
I'm waiting for your argument, Pinecreek. How does that argument that you just presented result in God does not exist or your God does not exist.
No, I'm not. If your God exists, then this is what I was going to say. I guarantee you, some Muslims who might be, you know, the weak type, wavering on the fence, are going to hear what we're discussing and say, you know what, that Pinecreek kind of makes sense.
But I'm Pinecreek. Please don't use that language. Yeah.
Is that bad?
I don't. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Pinecreek. What I don't understand is where's your argument?
He doesn't have one. He doesn't have one.
Where's your argument? Where
My
is your
argument
argument?
is Allah wants, Allah doesn't want.
Hold on. Pinecreek, you said at the first. So again, you're sort of changing. Initially, you said your God does not exist because, and then you were about to give an explanation. Then you start saying, well, some Muslims
didn't
might
say
be
that.
wavering. Then you said Muslims might not be wavering. Now you're saying to me, God wants, God doesn't want.
Right.
That's another. That's right. I said
that
answer.
like 3 times.
I've given you an answer a number of times, and you said, "Yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's not an internal critique." Then you said it's not a logical contradiction.
Yeah, I gave you your outs too.
Then you said it's not a logical contradiction. So what exactly is the argument? Do you understand where the frustration is?
The argument is Allah has free will, did not need to create, decided to create, knowing exactly what would happen, and it leads some people to hell.
Okay, so what's that? So sorry, hold on. What's that? What's that problem?
And that his creation leaded to pain, evil, suffering, and some people going to hell.
What category is that? A logical contradiction? Is it an evidential?
No, I would say that's just. I would say that's a logical deduction of where the premises lead. That you believe in a God who created, knowing what will happen, was okay with it, whatever that means, and that led to people going to hell.
But what does that mean in terms of your argument against Islam and against God in general, or God, or the God that we believe?
All I'm pointing out is what you believe.
Yeah,
I'm pointing out what you believe.
But we as Muslims, we know what we believe. This is not a problem
Are you sure?
for us.
Maybe you guys do, but not all of them. I'm sure you admit that.
I think. Can I just say one thing? I just want to say.
We're gonna have to move on, guys. We're gonna have to move on.
Let me just say one thing, and then we'll move on. Because Pinecreek, what he's trying to do here is his thesis statement. Because he didn't manage to bring the position to a contradiction. So he's saying, well, maybe some people in the audience will see the fact that God wanted some people or willed for some people to burn in hell, therefore, you know, they might have some kind of an emotional reaction to that and, you know, leave Islam or something. Fine, but you need to admit that it's an emotional reaction. And since we're appealing to emotions here, I'd like to rephrase that statement that God willed for creatures who freely choose to be evil to justly get punished in hell. If somebody has a negative emotional reaction to that, then by all means. But what Sharif was just saying is that a negative emotional reaction or an argument for emotion can be valuable to some people, but we prefer evidence and reason. So maybe next time when you have an actual logical argument and you have actual reasons to present,
Abdul,
and you choose to do that instead of appealing to emotion, we can have a discussion. I'm not trying to be rude to you. I'm just saying that literally you're not presenting an argument.
But
you're not...
when I'm hearing, and I'm hearing this from Sharif as well, it's like I hear an overcompensation, like, you guys really need to show that what you believe is logical and it's full of evidence because we don't want to look stupid, right? That's what I'm sensing.
No, we're taking you seriously, man. We're taking you seriously. You're saying you make a logical argument. We want you to present it. You want to say you want to make an argument.
I came on here.
We want to deal with it.
I came on here asking almost all questions. I made one claim.
That you made an emotional appeal to the audience.
Thank you for coming on.
Pinecreek, the point is this. Pinecreek, if you need to go, that's fine. But I just wanted to make this point as well.
No, he has to go whether he wants to go or not. Because we have other people, not to be rude, but we have other people waiting.
Come on, I'm more interesting than those other people.
I don't think so.
I'm not sure. I don't think
we'll find out. Take care, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Take care. Take care.
Bye.
Okay.
While he's off, because I do really want to make this point, and hopefully Pinecreek's listening in the chat, in the YouTube. The point is this: is that look, he's trying to present an emotional argument to try to so-called shake the foundations of some Muslims. Yeah, it's an emotional argument. That's it. That's all he's doing. It's not even an argument. It's just
the same thing with AP. Same thing with AP.
It's just an emotion. Now you can't go from saying I'm trying to make an internal critique to then saying, well, I'm just trying to affect emotional people, emotional, weak-minded Muslims or whatever it is. He needs to think about himself and look at his own epistemic foundations and how he builds his own, how he builds his own ideas up first and foremost. He should not be building his ideas based upon emotions and rejecting one proposition over another proposition just because it makes him feel icky. That's, it's crazy.
Silly. Yeah. And he said, oh, well, the Muslims here, they just want to be logical and rational. Well, yeah, of course. We don't want to make arguments and have our beliefs based purely on emotion rather than logic and reason. Of course. Now, Doug, if that's what you want, then fine. Maybe that's why you're an atheist, because your arguments and your position is based on emotion rather than reason. And the fact that you were kind of happy to admit that live on the show, I think that's a plus for us and not for you.